Good morning, students. We have seen in the chapter of manufacturing, that is, we saw the advantages of it, and we saw certain industries that were very, very important for India, and how the nation depends on those industries. The employment situation depends to a great deal on those industries, and of course, the GDP, that is gross domestic product of our country, depends on those industries, and they are very important industries like automobile and chemical and iron and steel. But we also discussed this very vital fact that these industries are not just important for India, that because in a unique sort of way, but these industries are important for any economy, any country on the planet which wants to be known as a modern society, as an industrialized society, which wants to give more employment to its people, which wants to be known as a technologically advanced nation. Those societies, those countries don't have a choice but to invest and keep investing in these industries. Now, everything has its pros and cons, as we are already aware. So, today we discuss its problems, the cons, that is, okay. Industrial pollution and environmental degradation, guys, and every cause has its effect. And when you do manufacturing of all kinds, you naturally have to exploit the natural resources. You cannot create the ore and the raw material for those industries from thin air. It has to be taken out from whatever Mother Nature has to offer, and sometimes, because in the world of capitalism, not sometimes, rather most of the times, we cross that limit because we ultimately end up doing more than what we actually should. We do not quite strike that balance which would be good for our economy and society, as well as would stabilize the environment. We don't quite understand that. We most of the time, and all the countries and all the uh, economies, we most of the time cross that boundary, which has a very harmful impact on, in the end, of course, us, we humans. So let us look into the problems which are caused by rapid and massive industrialization. Air pollution. Air pollution is caused by the presence of high proportion of undesirable gases such as sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide. Airborne particles, materials contain both solid and liquid particles like dust, sprays, mist, and smoke. Smoke is emitted by chemical and paper factories, brick kilns, refineries, smelting plants, and burning of fossil fuels in a big and small factories that ignore pollution norms. Toxic gas leaks can be very hazardous with long term effects. Are you aware of the Bhopal gas tragedy that occurred? Air pollution adversely affects students. This what they are referring to, the Bhopal gas tragedy, was the one that occurred more than 20 years ago, where the Union Carbide factory, there was the leakage of gas in Union Carbide factory, and that gas was methyl isocyanide. And because of that, one of the worst industrial disasters of all times happened, whereby more than, it is believed, 20,000 people died that very night because this gas was extremely poisonous. 20, almost 20,000 people died, and lakhs of people were made, some lost their eyes, some lost their limbs, and they were maimed for the rest of their lives. They were handicapped for the rest of their lives. They could, the life was never same for them. Water pollution, the second one, is caused by organic and inorganic industries, industrial wastes, and affluents discharged into rivers. The main culprits in this regard are paper, pulp, chemical, textile, and dyeing, petroleum refineries, tanneries, and electroplating industries that let out dyes detergents, acids, salts, and heavy metals like lead and mercury pesticides. So essentially, you have to understand water pollution is being caused again because of the industrial manufacturing processes, whereby you, as we had seen in this chapter, you use a lot of acids, use chemicals, and all of that ultimately, the byproduct, the waste product, ultimately goes to the soil, if not the rivers directly, and ultimately it contaminates and pollutes your water levels. And if it is directly going to the rivers, then it completely pollutes the rivers. And that is, if you remember, about more than a month ago, the media had covered uh, the the quality of water had improved dramatically in all parts of the world, not just in India, ever since the corona crisis had happened, because naturally all the factories had been shut down for months, 2, 3, 4 months. So there was no pollution in those rivers, in those water sources, in those ponds, whereby the industrial pollution and all that acid and all that waste product was not going into these rivers. And that is the reason why even a polluted river like Yamuna looked so bright and shiny, because why, it was now just a normal water without any industrial affluence. All the rivers in around different countries, the quality of all the rivers, their water had improved dramatically, just because the factories had not been running for the last 3, 4 months. So that's the difference it makes. Coming to the third point, thermal pollution of water occurs when hot water from factories and thermal plants is drained into rivers and ponds before cooling. So, what could be the effect on aquatic life? So, you can understand these uh, very hot waters, when you leave them, when you flush them in the rivers, what would happen? Waste from nuclear power plants, nuclear and waste weapon production facilities called cancers, birth defects, and miscarriages. Soil and water pollution are closely related. The dumping of wastes, especially glass, harmful chemicals, industrial effluents, packaging, salts, and garbage, renders the soil useless. Rainwater percolates to the soil, carrying the pollutants to the ground, and the groundwater also gets contaminated. So, what we are seeing is that even if you leave your industrial waste up, not below the ground, just on the ground, and you feel that yes, the water, it is away from the water would not get contaminated, but even there things are not safe, because the rainwater hits them, the rainwater washes them, and again takes everything, that polluted water, that washed water, to the water levels. It enters the ground, it goes and hits the source of water, and it pollutes there. Noise pollution not only results in irritation and anger, it can also cause hearing impairment, increased heart rate, and blood pressure, among other psychological effects. Unwanted sound is an irritant and a source of stress. Industrial and construction activities, machinery, factory equipment, generators, saws, and pneumatic and electric drills also make a lot of noise. So, students, nothing surprising here. We all know that beyond a point, we don't like noise. And though we have got used to it in the modern world, but then slowly and gradually it is causing a lot of problems, whether in our psychology, whether in our hearing problems. It is not good for us. That is what it is talking about. Now, control, how do we control all this? Because we know that, we now acknowledge that there is a problem, and naturally a lot of things need to be done about it. And since that is the reason why the government of India and different countries around the world once came up with the Paris Accord, whereby we came up with very strong and very strict environmental norms for the uh, industries, and how to clean the air, how to make it less polluted, everything. And most of the countries now follow those rules, and that is the reason why you see now the cars that we use, they started with and now they are very strict about the pollution that those cars cause in terms of Bharat 1 and Bharat 2, Bharat 3, Bharat 4. Now, in fact, you have to, in fact, you cannot even sell Bharat 4 cars in India. Why? Though environmentally it is considered to be safe, but not safe enough. And now you have to, all the cars now have to be at least Bharat 5. Okay, and all this is done so that better emission norms can be imposed and on these automobiles, because one of the major pollutants of air around us are these automobiles, these cars, these bikes, the buses. So they are the major source of pollution, and almost all the homes have it. Every home, just show me one home that does not have a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. We all have, and we all use it. And that is the reason why the government of India and the other countries as well, other associations as well, right, whether in Europe or in America, they are now very strict about it. Even the courts in those countries are very strict about it. Okay, control of environmental degradation. Every liter of wastewater discharged by our industry pollutes 8 times the quantity of fresh water. How can the industry pollution of fresh water be reduced? Some suggestions are minimizing use of water for processing by reusing and recycling it in two or more successive stages. That is, the water that we think has been used already, the wastewater, that should be recycled so that it can be put back into use, and we do not end up consuming extra water which is there in below the grounds, or if from our water sources, because the water that we have just discharged and we think it is of no good use, that can be put to put to good use if we have better technology and we can recycle that water properly. But then, yes, students, it is not very easy, because the recycling processes are not very not very cheap. There are two things: you need enormous amount of commitment for that, because all the societies and countries feel that अरे बहुत पानी है हमारे पास बहुत नदियां हैं, so we do not need to recycle it. That's the biggest problem, and also that the technology is expensive. The second point being harvesting of rainwater to meet water requirements. Just see the situation in Dehradun, for that matter. For the last many days, it's water everywhere. It rains and rains and it rains so much, right? It falls, so much of water falls in our uh, on our rooftop. So much of water falls in our campuses, and we do nothing about it. It just comes and flows and goes off, and ultimately the water that we use is again 100% is tap water, something which is supplied to us from the river sources or the water sources of government of Uttarakhand. Now all the water, rainwater, which just goes waste, we could have harvested that water, that we could have used that water had we set up harvesting units within our homes. Now government is making very strict that all the new individual homes that are being sanctioned by the governments, the state governments, they have to have the water harvesting um, procedure there, whereby whatever rain falls, whatever rainwater comes and falls within your campus, within your ground, you have to undertake measures to save it. Thank you.